Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Join me, Nana Akua, today and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today.
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun every Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
On radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. And now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dewbs and Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dewbs and Co.
Join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain every Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m. A news hour that comes with a trigger warning. Scorching hot opinion with prominent guests saying the unsayable and a little bit of weekend fun thrown in. Unlike other broadcasters, I won't be forgetting what the B in our name stands for. So howie in for Real Britain Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, Talking Pints.
In a fraction under 2 hours from now, the Conservative leadership hopeful Liz Truss will set out her vision for Britain should she become Prime Minister in an exclusive interview here on GB News at 5 o'clock with my colleague Alastair Stewart. The People's Forum in Leigh in Greater Manchester will give you, our GB News viewers and listeners, an opportunity to ask the current Foreign Secretary about the pressing issues of the day. Ahead of that exclusive interview at 5 o'clock, we give over our next 2 hours to the race for number 10 as Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss battle it out to convince Conservative members and Conservative members alone across the UK that they are the right leader to be our next Prime Minister. We'll analyse key policy issues from housing, the migrant crisis and crime with an expert lineup of guests. We'll be live in Leigh too ahead of tonight's forum, and they will speak to our political correspondent Tom Harwood. We'll also hear from residents there about what they want from our next Prime Minister.
Levelling up. Hearing the word, and people are banding the word about, but we need to, it should have been done by now.
So the race is on, but who are the Conservatives backing? Throughout the show today, I'll be joined by 3 Conservative voters in our blue corner, each with their own opinions about who's right to take not only the party forward, but the country too. And joining me for the next 2 hours having his say, the former editor of The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie. First, the latest news headlines.
Good afternoon. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date today on GB News. Now, the Foreign Secretary says more tax, including levies on energy companies, will not solve the cost of living crisis. Speaking at a life sciences centre, Liz Truss also denied that she's ruling out cash payments to help those on a low income. The Chancellor's due to hold crisis talks with energy bosses tomorrow, with figures showing households already owe suppliers £1.3 billion. Well, Uswitch says 6 million homes are in debt by an average of £206 already to their suppliers. The Tory leadership candidate says different strategies can be used to lower bills.
The answer to our problems are not more taxes. We have the highest taxes we've had for 70 years in this country. We're threatened with a recession. What we need to do is keep taxes low, attract investment, and I will do all I can to make sure that energy companies are delivering. That energy companies are delivering on increased supply, that energy companies are keeping bills as low as possible. But the answer is not yet another tax. That is a Gordon Brown-style solution.
Conservative MP Theresa Villiers, who's a Sunak supporter, says help is on its way.
I fully accept, as does Rishi, that we will need to do more. That's why he says that if he becomes Prime Minister, he would immediately suspend VAT on domestic energy bills. And he recognises that further support is also going to be needed. But I would emphasise, I would provide the reassurance that the measures already being delivered will involve a £1,200 amount of support for 8 million households.
There are also concerns about possible energy blackouts this winter. Senior research fellow at Imperial College, Malcolm Grimson, says the effects could be devastating.
It's a reasonable worst-case scenario. We are getting increasingly concerned about what happens if a number of things go wrong at the same time. So if demand is higher than we expect, a cold snap in January, coupled with a low wind speeds. We had quite low wind speeds last winter, which caused part of the current energy crisis, coupled with, say, a couple of power stations not being available. Then if all those things go wrong at the same time, we are closer to power cuts than we've been for some time.
Almost 1 million children in London will be offered a polio vaccine. The virus, which was officially eradicated in the UK 2 decades ago, has been detected in sewage across the north of the capital. There have been no confirmed cases, but health officials are concerned by the rising number of samples being found. Children between the ages of 1 and 9 will be given the jab. A child killed in a gas explosion in South London has been named locally as Sahara Salman. More than 100 people were evacuated from their homes following the blast, which destroyed a terraced house in Thornton Heath on Monday. 3 other people were taken to hospital. Manchester City's Benjamin Mendy has pleaded not guilty to an 8th count of rape. The footballer has already denied 7 counts of rape, 1 of attempted rape and sexual assault. The offences were allegedly committed against 7 women between October 2018 and August last year. His trial is due to start on Monday. The ex-girlfriend of former Manchester United footballer Ryan Giggs has told a court she became a slave to his every need and demand. The 48-year-old's on trial accused of assaulting Kate Greville and using controlling and coercive behaviour against her. He's also allegedly assaulted her younger sister. He denies all of the charges against him. Royal Mail's warning strike action will make pay rises less affordable because of the financial impact it will have on the business. More than 115,000 staff are set to walk out for 4 days in the coming weeks in a dispute over wages. In a statement, the company described the move as an abdication of responsibility for the long-term job security of workers. British author and illustrator Raymond Briggs, who's best known for The Snowman, has died at the age of 88. More than 5.5 million copies of his book have been sold globally. The animated film's been shown every Christmas since it was created in 1982. Well, the publisher Penguin Random House said the author leaves an extraordinary legacy and a big hole. This is GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now, let's head back to Colin.
£3 if you're watching and listening. We are less than 2 hours away from the People's Forum, exclusively on GB News, as my colleague Alastair Stewart puts your questions to the Conservative leadership hopeful Liz Truss in an exclusive GB News interview. The current Foreign Secretary will join Alastair and a live studio audience in Leigh in Greater Manchester. For the next couple of hours, though, ahead of the People's Forum, we will be looking at the race for number 10 as Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak go head-to-head. There to seat Conservative members, they are the right candidate to lead not only the party, but our country too, as our next Prime Minister. We'll focus on some of those key policy questions affecting your lives, from housing, migration and crime. Are police tackling the right types of crime is one of the questions that we'll be tackling. But before we begin, let's find out more about the red wall setting for tonight's forum. Leigh in Greater Manchester, from where our reporter Paul Hawkins has been speaking to folk.
Do you know where Leigh train station is?
No, there's no train station.
It used to, and they took it off us.
They've not had one for over 30 years.
It seems a bit ridiculous that a place as big as Leigh doesn't have a train station.
We've got nothing here, only scruff.
Only scruff?
Scruff, look at it.
Right.
Like a pig hole.
Turns out the station shut in 1969. Roughly 50,000 people live here, working mostly in retail or the public sector, and a higher proportion than the national average rely on benefits, even if they're working. This is a town, like so many in the northwest, built on industry, on coal and in cotton mills like this one.
I don't think people in Leigh currently get that opportunity to be equal, because I think we are viewed as northwest, or here in Leigh, it's something that's a second thought. Basically, we're not. We're living in a very deprived area, and I don't think that Liz Truss or the current government have got that focus for areas like this.
So when she says she's committed to levelling up, how do you feel?
I don't believe it at the moment. I'm constantly following and listening to what they're saying, and if what they're saying is something that they're going to follow through on, previous experience tells me they haven't done that. They've talked a lot about it.
Leigh is one of the so-called red wall seats. Labour since 1922, it switched to the Conservatives in 2019, lured in by promises to get Brexit done and reduce regional inequality. Either Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak will have to successfully defend this seat if they're to have any sort of victory at the next general election with a decent majority. What's the number one priority for Liz Truss if she becomes Prime Minister?
Well, the number one thing for Liz Truss is levelling up. Hearing the word, and people are banding the word about, but we need to, it should have been done by now, personally. They're committed to it, and they said they've been committed to it. It's part of a manifesto, she's committed to it, but we're still waiting here. I'm panicking. I mean, at the moment we're fine because we don't need the heating on, but obviously the coffee machine does use quite a lot of electric, so you're trying to, you know, cut corners, which I don't want to do because I love what we do. If they could give some help, now whether again it could be some extra financial help with our bills, that'll then not only help me as a family man with my grandkids, etc., and my children, but also people have a little bit of money in the pocket to come and spend in my shop.
The council says Leigh has had no levelling up money and urgent help is needed.
We are a predominantly hot studio, so energy costs and things like that. It would be a massive help if we got some kind of help with it or some kind of guidance with it. Cost of living's going up, inflation and stuff like that, so obviously it's taking a hit on everyone's pocket.
Just give us an idea, how much are your energy bills going up by?
Well, they've already doubled. Help us help everybody else. Like, that's what we're here for. We're trying to help everyone. We're trying to invest back into the community. We're trying to help people who are not just struggling physically, but mentally and things like that.
What about all this levelling up stuff that they talk about on the TV, like the politicians?
Well, do you believe them?
Yeah.
Well, we don't.
Paul Hawkins, GB News.
Interesting views there given to Paul Hawkins up in Leigh, the setting for our People's Forum today. Kelvin Mackenzie, former editor of The Sun, is alongside me here in the studio. It's that obvious question. I've got to start with it. If you were still editing The Sun, who would you plump for? Who would your leader column endorse?
Personally, I would go for... These things are decided not by editors.
I thought they were.
Well, I tell you what, you have to take the responsibility for it, but actually, Murdoch would say, I've made up...
Mr Murdoch.
Mr Murdoch to you. I've made up my mind. We're going for Rishi. And you can say, yes, good idea, sir. Even if you thought, actually, that he was the worst thing or was the least impressive of the two. Personally, I would go for Rishi, but that's because he can understand a balance sheet. And one of our issues for our country is that we are skint with a capital S. And every 2 minutes, somebody has their hand out. So now we've got Martin Lewis, or Lord Lewis, as he will shortly become, telling us that something must be done. And I'm sure something must be done. But the idea that something must be done across the whole nation, right, or everybody who pays an energy bill is now going to get some kind of handout is absolutely absurd. We haven't got the money. We are still recovering from the ridiculous idea of furlough, where a friend of mine's partner did nothing for 18 months, and at the end of the 18 months, she had more in her bank account than she did before she started. And she hadn't done anything at all. We're going to go down exactly the same route.
I know you feel very strongly, I have to say I'm minded to agree with you, that we've moved to a situation, we've created a society in Britain, and not just Britain, where the state is there to help people if anything in life goes wrong, and that's something relatively new under the sun. Is it not the case that actually, we're going to be talking to Liz Truss, Alastair Stewart's going to be interviewing Liz Truss tonight. Is it not the case that Liz Truss has a better handle on that essential Conservative prospectus that actually, you know, for instance, she said it only recently, you know, why should the state take money from you only then to decide how you get that money back? Why just take it out of the middleman?
So they took a pound off you and give you back 63 pence, because by the time the inefficiencies of the system have worked, you are worse off. You are absolutely correct. We should be entitled to have more of the money that we earn. I do not like the idea of politicians of all kinds coming up with ridiculous ideas. Gordon Brown now, right? Lord Brown, you know, whoever he is going to be, Gordon Brown now saying something must be done, something must be done. Right, when he was in government, when he was Chancellor and Prime Minister, he kiboshed the idea of nuclear energy. Had we started nuclear energy literally, 15 years ago, when he was in the cabinet, we might not have this problem today. So, you know, they're all wise after the event, these guys. They all want our money. I want my money, and then I can decide, well, how much gas or electric can I afford? Yeah. And if I turn it down or whatever, all right, there's going to be people who are really, really poor. Perhaps we should do something for them. Yes, I kind of get that. The idea of doing it for everybody, the kind of Martin Lewis approach, which is just keep chucking money at everything. And it's all right for him. He pocketed 80 million quid. It doesn't matter for him. He could have the central heating on all day for 1,000 years and it wouldn't cut into his money.
Just to be fair to Gordon Brown on the nuclear question, yes, Britain was an absolute technical front runner when it came to nuclear power back in the 1950s when you were still at school, Kelvin. Is that right? Okay.
Yes, I was there. I was there. I remember you being my head boy.
We'll move on, shall we? You heard those voices from Leigh a few moments ago about why they'd like to see levelling up become less of a phrase and more of a reality. In a column for the Evening Standard, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, said it would be profoundly dangerous for the country if levelling up were to be abandoned. If nothing else, it would destroy any remaining vestige of trust in our politics if a majority gained for one purpose was used to do the opposite. If that's the intention of these candidates, no ifs or buts, they must call a general election. Andy Burnham, joined by the writer and charity founder Nick Buckley, who has been based in Manchester for many years and understands the city better than many. Nick Buckley, welcome to you. If you could hear one thing from either candidate who wants to be the next leader of the Tory party and Prime Minister, what would it be?
That's a tough question because there's so many things I want to hear. If there was one thing at the moment I'd want them to talk about, it would be personal responsibility. Agreeing with your last guest you're just talking to then about the government constantly taking our money off us in taxes and then deciding how they're going to give some of it back to us. This isn't the way Britain should be. Britain should be full of free people who decide how they spend their own money and how they look after their own lives. We're becoming some sort of socialist state, and that's my big fear.
If we are becoming a socialist state or a quasi-socialist state, Nick, to what extent does that reflect in the values of Manchester? Because, you know, if the other side of Manchester from Leigh, if you look at a town like Oldham, you know, 1900, the then MP for Oldham, Winston Churchill. You know, this was one of the great cradles, one of the crucibles of the Industrial Revolution, Manchester. It was a place where enterprise, for better or for worse, really got a grip and powered our economic ascent. Where is it now?
It's been in the cauldron since the 80s, if not before. We needed to change in the 70s and 80s because the rest of the world was beating us on price and the cost of labour. So things were changing in this country. And Thatcher made lots of changes. Her only mistake was not putting in the new infrastructure and the new resources to keep those places like Bolton, Bury, Rochdale, to keep them thriving and giving them a new purpose in life. We left them behind. And every government since then has left them behind. People talk about Manchester, and sometimes they mean Greater Manchester. Manchester itself is booming and always has been booming, but you go 5-6 miles outside of the city centre, and you'll see poverty that you can't see anywhere else in the country because they've just been left behind. Council estates that no one's worked on for generations, no public transport, no way of getting into the city centre to get a good job. The schools are terrible. I've worked in some of these schools. Absolutely terrible. This is what we need to do. And they call it now the levelling up agenda. And I can talk about that all day if you wanted me to.
Well, let's focus on this aspect of levelling up. You could argue, Nick, I would argue, that the first thing you've got to get right for any levelling up to happen, you talked about the schools, for people to learn in an environment that's conducive to learning, is you've got to know that when you make that walk to school or back home from school, you're not going to be mugged. You've got to know that the criminals are on the run, not you. You've got a new, in Manchester, within Greater Manchester Police, a new Chief Constable, Stephen Watson, making waves, making headlines. For why? Because he just wants to solve crimes. He's not interested in pride flags or any of that stuff. He does tell his officers to polish their boots and have a shave and look smart because it matters from the bottom up. There'll be some people shouting at the telly saying, oh, stop it, that's just posturing, it doesn't change a thing. The figures show that it does matter. The criminals are not on the run in Manchester, but it's turning a corner.
Absolutely. I had my doubts about the new Chief Constable because he was appointed by Andy Burnham. And I was thinking to myself, here we go, we'll have more of the same. But up to now, I think it's been about a year and a half, he's impressed me. The police have stopped being woke nonsense fools. They don't dress up anymore at the pride events. And his old-fashioned policing instinct is kicking in. And that's how police officers should be. They should be clean-shaven. They should attend work smartly with polished shoes. Because that's what you expect when you go to the Hilton Hotel. So why don't we expect it from our Greater Manchester Police? So he is doing those things. He's bringing back some respect for the police. He's got a long, long way to go. So let's not pretend he's solved all the problems. But he seems to be the right man for the right job. And you're right. If you're a kid now in Greater Manchester and you're going to school and your only role models are local drug dealers and the local burglars, and you're trying your hardest at school and you're being beaten up and bullied because you're trying to make something of yourself, how are you going to be successful in life? So we need to tackle the nitty gritty of it, the real basic issues before we can start looking at anything else. And education is something we need to look at because education in Greater Manchester on the whole is failing a fifth of all children.
Nick Buckley, you continue to raise important questions. We appreciate it. Thanks very much. Coming up from 5 o'clock, Alastair Stewart, my colleague, will be joined by the current Foreign Secretary as you, the GB News viewers and listeners, put your questions directly to her. Ahead of that forum, we're looking at some of the key policy battlegrounds between Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak. Coming up, we'll cross over to our blue corner. We're joined by 3 Conservatives throughout the show today, each with their own thoughts on who is the right person, not only to take the party forward, but the country too. We'll be back in a moment.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation, This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain every Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m. A news hour that comes with a trigger warning. Scorching hot opinion with prominent guests saying the unsayable, and a little bit of weekend fun thrown in. Unlike other broadcasters, I won't be forgetting what the B in our name stands for. So howie in for Real Britain Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dewbs and Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dewbs and Co.
You're with Colin Brazier on GB News on TV and on radio. We're looking ahead to our People's Forum coming up this evening, exclusively on GB News from 5 o'clock, as the Tory leadership hopeful Liz Truss speaks to my presenter colleague Alastair Stewart and takes your questions too up there in Leigh. In our blue corner in the studio today, it's not blue, but there are bits of blue, as I welcome three Conservatives onto the show, each reflecting a diversity of views, I think it's fair to say, when it comes to who ought to be our next Prime Minister and why. There's the key question. Throughout the show, they'll be sharing their views on the two candidates and the policies they'll be presenting for Conservative members ultimately to vote on. First, let's find out who they are and who they're supporting, crucially, in the leadership race. We're joined by the Conservative Keith Prince, the Deputy Chair of the Greater London Authority, the Conservative commentator Anna McGovern, and the Conservative Councillor Andrew Eyre from Sevenoaks District Council. They all take subtly, or sometimes not too subtly, different views on things. Keith Prince, we'll start with you. You are a Sunak man.
No,
You're the
I'm
opposite.
Liz Truss, yes.
Yeah. For why?
Well, because I think she is going to come across with the most sensible policies, to be honest. And I think she really is able to assimilate with people. I've seen her speak. Yeah, you know, she's not the greatest orator of our time, but after she's done that and she gets down with the people, she's a really real human being and there's a real enthusiasm for the people that have met with her.
And she's got better.
Yeah,
through the
she
process,
has got better.
Which is to be expected, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. You can teach people how to speak, but you can't teach people how to think. And that's the difference.
Yeah, well, we'll come back to that because the extent to which she's thinking on the hoof some of the policies that ought to, well, you know, they are the ones that have been presented. Andrew, Rishi Sunak then?
It's the economy. That's what it comes down to. And I think the person who best led the country through the disaster of the pandemic and is the best person to lead it out of that pandemic. We're not out of the woods and there's clear blue water between the two candidates. People can choose a definitive action of what to do. People can believe themselves whether increasing the credit card of the country is the way forward now we're getting out of the pandemic.
It's not a message that's resonating with members. If the polls are to be believed, Andrew, you know, that idea of fiscal probity, you may find it attractive, but you are in the minority.
It's an increasing minority, but I accept the point of the polls, and we've seen too often that polls don't really tell the story. The 2019 election showed what polls can do and what a leader can do. And that's what I think Rishi Sunak is.
Can I just check, by the way, have you both voted already?
I haven't yet, no.
Right, okay.
I haven't had my papers.
I'm still waiting for my ballot to come through.
I mean, Anna, there is that point. I mean, you are so far undecided, but there is well, are you undecided?
I've never really supported either of the candidates. I think if push comes to shove, it will be Liz Truss. However, I've never been able to support either of them, just on the basis of how they've presented themselves and throughout this leadership debate. And I think many people from the public, I think they do struggle to, have faith in the current Conservative government, because as they see it, here we have two people who are running to be the Prime Minister who were integral in Boris Johnson's government and his entire leadership. And I think so many people have lost faith, particularly with the dishonesty and a lot of scandal that happened throughout his leadership. And in their view, what do they present that's any different to what Boris Johnson did throughout his leadership?
So you're not one of those Conservatives who thinks actually it was probably a mistake to have knifed Boris. Quite clearly, you don't think that. Are you indicating, however, that one of the candidates who didn't get through to the final two might have been a better bet?
In terms of the five, I think if it came down to, let's say, if it was the Conservative members who would have had a say in who were in those final two, I actually think it might have been a completely different lineup. I don't think it would have been Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak. I think individuals such as Kemi Badenoch, potentially, or Penny Mordaunt, they might have had a chance at the final two. But of course, it came down to the decisions of MPs, and now the members have that final vote.
Yeah. We could argue, and we'll discuss this, I'm sure, the extent to which it's interesting the way policies are being ventilated, and to what extent you guys, as Conservative Party members and activists, find that terribly interesting, and to what extent the rest of the country find it a switch off. We'll discuss that, and we'll discuss more when it comes to policies with our Blue Corner Conservative members throughout the course of the next hour and a half or thereabouts. For now, though, it's the day's news with Rosie.
Good afternoon, it's 3:36. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. The Foreign Secretary Liz Truss says more tax, including levies on energy companies, will not solve the cost of living crisis. Speaking at a life sciences centre, she also denied ruling out cash payments to help low-income earners. The Chancellor is due to hold crisis talks with energy bosses tomorrow, with figures showing households already owe suppliers £1.3 billion. The Tory leadership candidate says different strategies can be used to lower bills. Almost 1 million children in London are going to be offered the polio vaccine. It's after the virus was detected in sewage in boroughs across the north of the capital. There have been no confirmed cases, but health officials are concerned by the rising number of samples being found. Children between the ages of 1 and 9 will be given the jab. Manchester City's Benjamin Mendy has pleaded not guilty to an 8th count of rape. The footballer has already denied 7 counts of rape, 1 of attempted rape and sexual assault. The offences were allegedly committed against 7 women between October 2018 and August last year. His trial is due to start on Monday. Royal Mail is warning strike action will make pay rises less affordable because of the financial impact it will have on the business. More than 115,000 staff are set to walk out for 4 days over the coming weeks. The companies described the move as an abdication of responsibility for long-term job security. We're on your TV, online and radio. This is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
The pound will buy you $1.223 and €1.183. The price of gold currently stands at £1,469.25 per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Well, back to our build-up of the People's Forum. It's in Leigh in Greater Manchester this afternoon. And one of the topics that we are pretty likely to hear talked about and ventilated is what Liz Truss, who's going to be with Alastair Stewart this evening, would do about how crime rates are fought in Britain. Home Office figures released a few weeks ago show recorded crime in England and Wales at a 20-year high, with less than 6% of reported offences leading to a suspect actually being charged. You've heard it again and again, haven't you, that the police are not tackling crime in the way the public want crime to be tackled. Our Home and Security editor, Mark White's been looking at what both Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak have pledged to do so far, if they're given the keys to number 10.
Appearing soft on crime is simply not an option when you're running for the Tory leadership. And so both Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss are talking tough on the need to cut soaring levels of violent crime and ensure neighbourhood policing also becomes a key priority. Liz Truss says she wants to see a 20% reduction in serious offences like homicide and a similar cut in other key crimes, including burglary, by the time of the next election. It makes a good headline, but will be next to impossible to achieve in just a couple of years. Rishi Sunak says he wants chief constables to be far less focused on those causing offence on social media, which will certainly be welcomed by much of the electorate. Many of those within policing have reacted badly, though, to Liz Truss's plans for league tables, where chief constables who fail to meet their key targets will effectively be publicly shamed and called before ministers to explain themselves. The Truss campaign believes this is an important step forward in transparency and accountability. Many officers think league tables are divisive and bad for morale. Mark White, GB News.
Well, Shabnam Chowdhury is a former detective superintendent at the Metropolitan Police in London. Shabnam, thanks for coming into the studio. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem, Colin.
Mark White in that piece made clear something that a lot of our viewers certainly agree with, which the police spend too much time daubing their patrol cars in, you know, pride flags and all the rest of it. But there's a consensus to that, so that's been overdone. But that ignores the fact that there's a deeper crisis within the police service, which is that there is a wide view, it seems to me. The public feel that when they report a crime that's serious to them, it could be a burglary, their car getting nicked, whatever it is, the police do not take it seriously enough.
Well, I think it's not a question of the police take it seriously enough or not. It's a question of they have the resources or not to actually be able to deploy to those particular type of crimes. We know that 1 in 30 crimes, burglary crimes, are being solved, which is absolutely appalling.
When you started, what was it? Do you a rough guess?
It was a lot higher than that, but things have changed a lot since then, because now the Crown Prosecution Service make the decision as to whether or not you will charge a prisoner, a suspect, whereas back in my day we'd make those decisions, and so we'd get a lot more people through the system. Didn't necessarily mean that they were convicted.
Yeah. So when it comes, as you say, it's resources as far as you're concerned. We get regularly on here a guy called Kevin Hurley. You may have come across Kevin.
I know Kevin.
And he will say, yeah, resources up to a point. He'll also say it's about the will. It's about the will of officers at the sharp end, on the ground, just to actually, you know, get stuck in, for want of a better phrase. Does he have a point?
I think it's got a very good point, and I think what's really important is that when you do have the resources, you've not only got to have the will of officers, you've got to make sure that those officers that you're actually employing, that you're vetting and bringing into the organisation, actually care about the job that they do, that they do care about the public, that they do want to keep them safe, and that when they're out reporting burglaries and investigating them, they're investigating them to the best of their abilities. We get so many members of the public who actually go and investigate their own crimes, solve them, then bring them to the police officers, and then sometimes they don't necessarily always actually then go ahead and further investigate them.
Shepard, I'm going to bring Kelvin McKenzie in just a second, but can you answer this question? Why is churn levels so high in the police force at the moment? Why do so many officers join up, well-intentioned, and then disappear?
I think a lot of police officers that join now don't actually realise the challenges that they have. You know, when you've got recruitment adverts saying that this is such a sexy and exciting job and, you know, all these things are happening, the reality of policing is it's very, very gutty. Significant amount of policing is around violence against women and girls, domestic incidents, antisocial behaviour. There's not a sexy side to policing. You are dealing with gutty work, day in, day out, working really, really hard, and also getting vilified by the public because...
And occasionally getting filled in by them as well.
Exactly.
Kelvin?
I think that is one of the points, is how much support for the police officers. Right, a station like GBNews, 101 support. But I suspect if you go to Talk TV or you go to Newsnight or something like that, then there would be an equal balance against the ex-superintendent, saying, they do this, they do that, they do the other. You know, and I think and social media won't be helpful in that respect. Yeah, I'm sure there's bad apples. If you employ tens of thousands of people, you're going to have the odd bad apple in there. But by and large, do ordinary people support the police force? Yes. Do they make their voice heard? No. And if you come from an area like mine, Weybridge, why are there no police officers just walking down the high street? I realise that may be half an hour in which they're not doing something else. I want some sense that they are acting on my behalf. But look, the truth about the matter is there is not enough of the media that actually goes out and says, thank God we have a police force. And, you know, you've got the Manchester guy, Burnham, saying, I've done this, I put this bloke in, I put that bloke in there. What's happening to crime?
Well, just since you mentioned the Chief Constable of Greater Manchester Police, we were talking about him earlier, his sort of back-to-basics approach, which is a good headline, but in reality might not work. But Shabnam, you've worked with him before, and you're a believer?
I believe in what he said. I think his ideas are really good. I think it's really important to professionalise police officers. I think that also going back to basics means actually increasing your neighbourhood policing so that they can focus on intelligence, so that they can focus on local crimes like burglaries, like antisocial behaviour, like criminal damage, all those crimes that affect and have a huge impact on local communities. And if you don't have smart police officers and you've got cops turning up looking like Wurzel Gummidge, what faith are you going to have in them?
Because you will get people who will say to you, and I'm sure they've said to you, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that somebody's not shaved or they've got tats, you know, or their hair's a mess. They're a police officer. You know, policing's not about appearances. It's about the job you do. You say, actually, it is, because if they've got to do the death knock to tell a parent that their kid's just been knocked over on the zebra crossing, it matters how you look.
Well, communication is absolutely everything, but also professionalism is also absolutely everything. And I don't agree that, you know, tattoos is one thing. I actually agree that you represent the people that you police in communities, but actually looking smart and making the best of what some of those cheap, terrible uniforms are, and making the best of that, you can do that. It's not difficult.
Shabnam Chowdhury, really appreciate you coming in today. Thanks very much indeed for your time. Thanks a lot. Many emails coming in on the subject of the leadership contest that we're going to see advanced one way or another when we see Liz Truss being questioned by a studio audience, but also by my colleague Alastair Stewart a little later on in the next 2 hours, next hour or so, in fact. Bob says, I think Liz Truss will say anything if it will earn her votes. It will be interesting to hear her answers to our questions tonight. Will says, our politics are in such a bad place with people like Rishi Sunak in the last couple of years. This country needs radical change ASAP. He is not the answer. Mark says we are witnessing the Conservative Party splitting in two, Labour and Tory, both unpalatable. Well, another question we've heard a lot about throughout the leadership race. It's been, in a sense, a defining subject, and that subject is taxation. No different at last night's hustings in Darlington. Tax, unsurprisingly, given that Darlington's now hosting the Treasury, at the heart of both Rishi Sunak's and Liz Truss's campaigns.
Well, what I want to do is make sure, first of all, we're reducing taxes, because that is needed to drive economic growth. Currently, the country is predicted to go into a recession. That will be a huge problem. We know what recessions are like. People lose their jobs, there are fewer opportunities.
Because tax cuts alone are not much good if you're a pensioner who's not earning any extra money. They're not much good if you're working hard on the national living wage, because Liz's tax cut is worth about £1 a week for that person. It's worth £0 for a pensioner. That's not right.
Well, Tom Clougherty is the head of tax at the Centre for Policy Studies. He's joining us here in the studio. He's alongside Kelvin McKenzie, who will have something to say about tax, you can be sure. Tom, whose message on tax, Sunak or Truss, do you find more plausible?
I mean, I think they both have their good points, and I do think that Rishi at times has been unfairly miscategorised as an aggressive tax increaser and someone who doesn't care about growth. You know, that being said, certainly my own preference is I lean towards Liz Truss's approach on tax. It does seem crazy to me that we hike national insurance in the teeth of a cost of living crisis. It seems even more perverse that we're going to increase corporation tax by a third just as the economy tips into recession. So I think she has a strong message there, and there's a reason she's kept hammering it.
Was it the IFS this morning who said fiscal drag, inflation and fiscal drag means that actually people are just going to... It doesn't matter how much either of these candidates try and cut taxes at the moment, people will be dragged up into higher tax bands as they demand higher pay.
Right, absolutely. And it's one of the extraordinary things that as much as the candidates have talked about tax, they've tried not to mention that. And so I think when they introduced that freeze on the personal allowance and the income tax thresholds, it was expected to raise about $8 billion a year, at the end of that policy. Now it's up to $30 billion. So that's a huge tax increase, much bigger than the Treasury intended to implement. And yeah, that does, in a way, it doesn't exactly dwarf, but it does offset the kind of tax cuts that Liz Truss is talking about.
Your think tank likes tax cuts. Yeah. You must like the fact that whatever else this leadership contest is generating, it's generating conversations around the extent to which people ought to be allowed to, what was the old phrase, allow the money to fructify in their own pockets, not the state's. And for Rishi Sunak to say, by the end of the decade, 4p in the pound, cut off income tax, I mean, that's a bold statement of Conservative economics, isn't it?
It is, absolutely. And yeah, I've been doing this for long enough to remember when people were wearing sort of tax cuts please stickers at Conservative Party conference when David Cameron was talking about, no immediate tax cut promises, sharing the proceeds of growth. And to a certain extent, we've seen a continuity of that approach for many years. Liz Truss, at least, is offering something different. I mean, Rishi is as well, I suppose, with that pledge you mentioned to cut to 16p. And yeah, I mean, if you have a cost of living crisis and you're Conservatives, the very first thing you should do is let people keep more of their own money.
Kelvin?
Well, my only argument against Liz Truss is that she's never looked at the balance sheet in her life, wouldn't have the vaguest idea how it all worked out, and that this is a massive bet, right? A bet that I haven't seen work anywhere else. Have you seen it work anywhere else, Tom? Where in the middle of a potential recession, we've decided that we haven't got any money in the bank, so what we do is we will print some more of it. Here we are. Let's have a go at that.
I think, first of all, you're being a little bit harsh on Liz Truss because she was Chief Secretary to the Treasury.
Yeah, no, but
she was overseeing the public finances.
She is a politician.
True, she is a politician.
At least with Rishi, you were seeing somebody who had come out of the financial industry. Do you see what I mean? I mean, we can all have a guess. We can all... Colin would probably make a great Chancellor on that basis.
Well, if it's offered to me, I wouldn't say no.
You probably should.
GBNews would be sad to lose you, Colin. You know that. There'd be such a fight.
Tom, does it turn people off? Tax, there are more interesting political topics than... I mean, maybe not for yourself or at CPS, but most people find, until they've actually got to dig into their own pockets and they think, wow, this is hurting, and boy, it's hurting right now, highest tax take for 70 years, but it's not the stuff of sexy politics, or is it?
Well, it is for a certain type of people, and it's not just people like me who work in think tanks. It's probably a lot of people in the Conservative Party membership. And it's quite easy to lose track of that this is not a general election. This is not a national primary like you'd have in America. The target audience is, 150,000 Conservative Party members, and they care about tax a lot more than your average voter. So there's a reason the focus is there and why there's all of this talk about no handouts, why neither candidate really wants to specify what they will inevitably do in the winter when the energy price rises again. And so, yeah, they're aiming at one audience, and probably things will have to shift a little bit when they get into government. But nevertheless, it's quite interesting that this has become such a big topic in a way that it hasn't been for so many years.
Tom Clufferty from the Centre for Policy Studies. Tom, thanks for coming in, really appreciate it. In just over an hour, some of our viewers will be putting their questions to the Conservative leadership hopeful, Liz Truss. Alastair Stewart will be live with the Foreign Secretary in Leigh. It's in Greater Manchester. A look at the person then behind our potential next Prime Minister.
Liz Truss could well become our next Conservative Prime Minister. But she was once a Liberal Democrat.
We Liberal Democrats believe in opportunity for all. We believe in fairness and common sense.
She was born in 1975 and as a young girl moved to Paisley with her family and then to Leeds. She studied at Oxford, where she changed party to become a Conservative. She married her husband Hugh in the year 2000. It was third time lucky in her attempts to stand for Parliament. In 2010, she was elected as MP for South West Norfolk. She entered Cabinet in 2014 as Environment Secretary, never one to miss a good photo op.
I don't think that's bad. That was my first go.
And giving a much-remembered speech at party conference.
We import 2/3 of our cheese. That is a disgrace.
Liz Truss might have campaigned for Remain in the Brexit referendum, but it didn't hurt her career. Shortly after that historic vote, she became Justice Secretary under Theresa May, the first female Lord Chancellor in 1,000 years of the role.
We have one at the door, please, Mum.
Boris Johnson then made her Trade Secretary, and she appeared to relish her role, signing 70 post-Brexit trade deals.
Foreign Secretary, are you pleased?
Her successes earned her a promotion to Foreign Secretary, where she helped bring Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe home, and has taken a tough line on Russia.
Now is not the time to let up. Putin must fail.
She backed Boris Johnson to the end, but now Liz Truss wants to lead the Conservative Party and the country as our next Prime Minister.
So, Conservative Party members, they will be putting questions to Liz Truss in Leigh in Greater Manchester this evening. We've got some Conservative thinkers here in the studio as well to ponder ahead of our People's Forum with Alastair Stewart and Liz Truss tonight. They are Keith Prince, who's a member of the Greater London Authority. He's supporting Liz Truss. We've got the Conservative commentator Anna McGovern, who is still relatively undecided, or at least she's just not telling us, and the Conservative councillor Andrew Eyre, who's from Sevenoaks District Council, who is supporting Rishi Sunak. And Andrew, on that point, as a Sunak supporter, you are absolutely persuaded, because we know it's true, that he is convinced, I was going to say convicted, it's not a crime, convinced Brexiteer. I was reminded by that footage of a young Liz Truss as a Liberal Democrat who then became a Remainer. Interesting that's not being a big theme for this contest, has it?
And I wouldn't criticise her. She was a Remainer, she voted Remain, but after that, unlike too many people, she didn't become a Remainer. She said, let's make this work. So I think that's valid that it's not been brought forward. What's more important, I think, is Rishi Sunak has consistently supported Brexit. He's consistently supported financially, economically and commercially Brexit, and that's the way forward.
And you'll be pleased, I suppose, on one level, as a Conservative, that you're not seeing this hideous blue-on-blue stuff about Brexit, because it had the potential, didn't it, more than the potential, for decades, to leave the party absolutely riven. The battles over Europe.
Yes, absolutely. But I think also with the two candidates, there has been what I've noticed personally, and I think many other members have noticed as well. There has been quite a little bit, quite a lot of bickering, infighting between the two. I think, especially when the 5 candidates were up on that stage, doing the, questions, taking questions from the audience and such, and the presenter, Rishi Sunak, was very much cutting in on Liz Truss, interrupting. It felt like she wouldn't even let her finish her answers to anything. And I think this is something that we don't really want to see from our candidates, because it just came off very immature and just like he didn't really respect any of her time. And I think whoever becomes the Prime Minister, whether it's Rishi Sunak or Liz Truss, they will have to work together. And with a party that is so split right now and so much disarray and so much, lack of faith within the party, I think they do need to find a little bit of middle ground eventually.
Keith Prince, just in terms of political journeys that people make, I mean, I say Liz Truss, yes, she was a Remainer, she was a Liberal Democrat, but I invoked the memory of Winston Churchill, who was, his first seat was Oldham, on the other side of Greater Manchester. So people do cross the floor, people do evolve politically. Will it matter to anybody she used to be in the Yellow Peril?
Well, I think the good thing is that being a Liberal Democrat's curable. And I think that means that there's hope for everybody, really. As you say, Winston Churchill, he made the journey, and a lot of our really strong members have come from a different political background. A lot of people have come over from Labour in the past. So, no, I don't think it really matters where you came from. It's more about how you get there, really. And I don't think we should judge people from their backgrounds.
Do we not judge people?
Well, I think that sadly we do, and you were talking just in the green room about the way Liz Truss presents herself, and I was criticising the criticism for saying nobody should be looking at that. Rishi Sunak is a very polished performer, very fluent performer. He has moved back from the first BBC interview, as Liz Truss has gone the other way and has improved her presentation. So, the presentation-wise, I don't think is an issue. I would challenge your thing that the Conservative Party is split. At the moment, it's an election and people are saying one way or the other for an election. I don't believe the Conservative Party is split. I think there is clear blue water between Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss about how you deal with the economy. But once one of them gets in, that will go ahead and the Conservative Party will be behind the country.
Split only, Andrew, in the sense that historically it's had its... If you think back to Maastricht and all that sort of stuff, there have been these... Back to
Brexit, yes. But Brexit is gone. Brexit is done.
Okay.
It's only Remoaners who are left.
OK. Is Brexit finished? Is it still an issue? Let us know your views. We'll try and get some of those emails away. It's just gone 4 o'clock. Well, welcome to our special programming. It's just gone 4 o'clock. Coming up in the next hour, we're going to be reflecting on the People's Forum with Liz Truss. It's less than an hour away as the Tory leadership hopefuls set out, or in particular, she sets out her vision for Britain should she become Prime Minister. In an exclusive interview here on GB News at 5 o'clock with my colleague Alastair Stewart, the current Foreign Secretary, will give you, our GB News viewers and listeners, an opportunity to ask about the questions of the day. Ahead of that exclusive interview in Leigh in Greater Manchester, this programme for the next hour looking at the race for number 10, Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss competing to win the votes of Conservative Party members and party members alone, though obviously with an eye to a bigger audience of many millions come a general election in the next couple of years. We will analyse key policy questions from housing to the migrant crisis as well as crime with a lineup of guests. Also this hour, ahead of tonight's forum, we'll go behind the scenes in Leigh with our political correspondent Tom Harwood as the studio audience begin to arrive with their questions for the would-be Prime Minister. So the race is on, but who are Conservatives backing For the next hour, we'll be joined by our 3 Conservative voters and activists in our blue corner, each with their own opinions about who is right to take not only the party forward but the country too. And joining me to have his say, the former editor of The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie. First, the latest news headlines with Rosie.
Good afternoon. 2 minutes past 4. I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. The Foreign Secretary says more taxes, including levies on energy companies, will not solve the cost of living crisis. The Tory leadership candidate has also denied ruling out giving cash payments to help low-income earners. The Chancellor, Nadhim Zahawi, is due to hold crisis talks with energy bosses tomorrow. That's as figures show households already owe suppliers £1.3 billion. Liz Truss says different strategies can be used to lower bills.
The answer to our problems are not more taxes. We have the highest taxes we've had for 70 years in this country. We're threatened with a recession. What we need to do is keep taxes low, attract investment, and I will do all I can to make sure that energy companies are delivering. That energy companies are delivering on increased supply, that energy companies are keeping bills as low as possible. But the answer is not yet another tax. That is a Gordon Brown-style solution.
Well, Conservative MP Theresa Villiers, who supports Rishi Sunak for Prime Minister, says help is on its way.
I fully accept, as does Rishi, that we will need to do more. That's why he says that if he becomes Prime Minister, he would immediately suspend VAT on domestic energy bills. And he recognises that further support is also going to be needed. But I would emphasise, I would provide the reassurance that the measures already being delivered will involve a £1,200 amount of support for 8 million households.
Staying with energy, and there are also concerns about the possibility of energy blackouts this winter. Senior research fellow at Imperial College, Malcolm Grimston, says the effects could be devastating.
It's a reasonable worst-case scenario. We are getting increasingly concerned about what happens if a number of things go wrong at the same time. So if demand is higher than we expect, a cold snap in January, coupled with low wind speeds. We had quite low wind speeds last winter, which caused part of the current energy crisis, coupled with, say, a couple of power stations not being available. Then if all those things go wrong at the same time, we are closer to power cuts than we've been for some time.
In other news, almost 1 million children in London will be offered a polio vaccine. The virus, which was officially eradicated in the United Kingdom 2 decades ago, has been detected in sewerage across the north of the capital. There have been no confirmed cases, but health officials are concerned by the rising number of samples being found. Children between the ages of 1 and 9 will be given the jab. Manchester City's Benjamin Mendy has pleaded not guilty to an 8th count of rape. The footballer has already denied 7 counts, as well as 1 of attempted rape and 1 of sexual assault. The offences were allegedly committed against 7 women between October 2018 and August 2021. His trial is due to start on Monday. The ex-girlfriend of former Manchester United footballer Ryan Giggs has told a court she became a slave to his every demand. The 48-year-old is on trial accused of assaulting Kate Greville and using controlling and coercive behaviour against her. He also allegedly assaulted her younger sister. He denies all the charges against him. Nicola Sturgeon has been accused of abandoning Scotland's islanders on a catastrophic scale after disruption at a state-owned ferry company led to rationing. Some shops were forced to ration essential items such as milk and bread over the weekend after a Calmac ferry was taken out of service for the 3rd time in as many weeks. Politicians representing island communities have written a letter to Scotland's Transport Minister urging action to be taken. Royal Mail warns proposed strike action will make pay rises less affordable because of the financial impact it will have on the business. More than 115,000 staff are set to walk out for 4 days in the coming weeks in a dispute over wages. In a statement, Royal Mail called the move an abdication of responsibility for workers' long-term job security. And British author and illustrator Raymond Briggs, best known for the Snowman book, which was turned into a popular animated film, has died at the age of 88. More than 5.5 million copies of the book have been sold globally, and the film has been shown every Christmas since it was created in 1982. Publisher Penguin Random House said he leaves an extraordinary legacy. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get back to Colin Brazier.
Eight minutes past 4. In just under an hour, we will be crossing live this news channel to the People's Forum, exclusively on GB News, as my colleague Alastair Stewart puts your questions to the Conservative leadership hopeful Liz Truss in an exclusive GB News interview. The current Foreign Secretary will join Alastair and a live studio audience in Leigh in Greater Manchester. But ahead of our People's Forum, we'll be looking at the race for number 10 as Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak go head-to-head to convince Conservative members they are the right candidate to lead not only the party, but the country too, as our next Prime Minister. We'll try and focus on some key policy questions affecting your life, your lives, from housing, migration and Brexit. Let's start this hour by crossing to Leigh. Our political correspondent, Tom Harwood, is inside tonight's venue to give us a peek into what's happening there. Tom, over to you.
That's right, Colin. Welcome to Leigh, and what feels like a bit of an empty room right now. But in just a few moments' time, this room will start filling up with GB News viewers, with voters, with people with an absolute interest in who becomes the next Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Sitting around me are all of the chairs that will host the audience tonight, and right here, the table at which Alastair Stewart and Liz Truss will sit for this crucial question, this crucial interview. Most importantly, it's not just going to be Alastair asking these questions. These questions are going to come from real people. They're going to bring questions that potentially the Westminster Journalist Club might not want to bring to these candidates. So Liz Truss will be facing questions from people from this local area, this crucial seat of Leigh, of course, a Labour seat since the 1920s, for almost 100 years, right through until 2019, when it was won for the first time by the modern Conservative Party. If Liz Truss, or indeed Rishi Sunak, want to lead the Conservative Party to any sort of comparable victory to the one in 2019, they will need to hold seats like Leigh. This is going to be a really crucial evening to see what the people of this area have to ask and what Liz Truss has to say.
Tom, thanks very much indeed. Kelvin Mackenzie, former editor of The Sun, is alongside me. My first question, if I'd been invited to be Alastair Stewart this evening, Kelvin, would be, since they've got a bar in there, it would be, Liz, what you're drinking. Does it tell you anything about somebody? What's it?
Well, it tells you something about Nigel Farage, so I should imagine it tells you something about... It depends. I would have thought, looking at her, she looks like a gin and tonic person.
Well, there you go. It has some relevance.
Whereas, of course, Rishi's made it clear that he doesn't drink, but his missus does like a slurp. So...
Can I push this a little bit further? Does character matter? Do the private lives of candidates matter? I say that to you, particularly as a former editor of The Sun, who spent, according to your critics, far too long raking over the coals of people's private lives.
Very enjoyable it was too.
I think
there was no dustbin that I wasn't involved in.
Well, I'm one of those people who happens to think there is a News of the World-shaped hole at the heart of British public life, because actually this stuff does matter.
Well, actually, it does matter. Actually, Murdoch would like to bring back the News of the World as an online idea.
We're straying off topic.
Oh, I know,
slightly.
but I just thought I'd just throw that in as add a bit of interest.
What have we learned about their characters? We've learned that they've both got staying power, they've got stamina. In Liz Truss's case, she's learned to be a better performer. I think that's fair to say, isn't it?
And she had an affair while married. Does that make any odds? 20-odd years ago, yes, it would have done. Today, people say, who cares? You're running the country, it's up to you. The significant problem, and I say this because my own accountant, a man who you can imagine does sweat on a regular basis, right, said he couldn't vote, right? This is an accountant, couldn't vote for somebody like Rishi because they didn't understand what a gas bill or an electricity bill looked like. So I'm not sure whether your money is your character, but certainly it represents, I think, a significant impediment.
Well, I don't know if your accountant's sweating, but you've got me sweating by making assertions that I can't in any way validate.
Well, no, it's kosher. Ask your listeners to look it up, or viewers even.
OK, Kelvin, thanks very much indeed. Let's turn to the Conservative commentator, Alex Dean, who's been watching the hustings closely and thinking what, Alex? I mean, we know, don't we, one of the latest polls says that actually Liz Truss is going to be maybe in a better position to take on Keir Starmer than Rishi Sunak.
Yeah, my first instinct is that these hustings, whilst of course an admirable exercise in democracy within the Conservative Party, are not changing that many minds. I think people are going into them, if they're in the audience or watching them online, and coming out with pretty much the same views that they had on the way in. And that's true for both candidates. If you went in thinking you were going to vote for Rishi, you came out thinking you're going to vote for Rishi. If you went in thinking you're going to vote for Liz, you came out thinking you're going to vote for Liz. So, I mean, it is a good thing on one view that we have this exercise. I cannot help but think it's going on a bit long, and people in the country might like it to speed up a bit. And the other reason I think that, Colin, is I think that people have seen a lot of these candidates. It's like you were saying about knowing that they've got staying power. These two people have been on the public stage now for quite some time. I think we know a lot about them. I don't think we're going to learn much more in the next few weeks.
And meantime, according to some critics, Alex, you've got a paralysis at the heart of government where action needs to be taken on the cost of living.
Yeah, that's right. And I think government's doing its best now to act and to be seen to be acting. But it's very difficult when you know that the Prime Minister is so term limited, and it's very difficult when so much attention is on a leadership campaign. Look, we are where we are, and you can't change the rules of a contest halfway through. I'm just saying that in hindsight, I think the party might take away one useful lesson, which is the members, yes, you may need a bit more time to have a think, but you don't need this much more time than it took the members of Parliament to whittle down to two final candidates.
Alex, can I just make the case for this extended period of navel-gazing by the Conservative Party? And I suppose it's this. If you are a young voter or somebody who will soon be voting, is it not a useful thought exercise for them to have to, I was going to say switch on their evening news broadcast? They don't do that. Turn on your TikTok account and see candidates parleying forth ideologies around things like cutting tax, the shape of the state, basic Conservative principles. And they are the ones that are filling the airwaves, not the other stuff.
Yeah, look, there's nothing wrong with what you just said. Every single point there is correct. My point is it's a balancing act between that on the one hand and the need to have certainty in government, to know who's going to be leading it, to let them form their new cabinet and so forth on the other hand. And my feeling is my man's opinion, that we've taken a bit too long about it. And certainly I think that's the feedback from a lot of people in the country. It's a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, I think also this is quite an interesting recruiting exercise for a party. You may want to join if you want to have a say in the next one. On the other hand, there's a lot of people feeling a bit disenfranchised and saying, well, I don't get a vote, so why is this going on so long? And why on earth have those people got a vote when I haven't? Which, of course, is the message is participatory democracy, go and join a political party. But you understand what they mean, especially when it's over such a period of time.
Given how many of those members we think probably have already voted, actually. Alex, thanks very much indeed for your time. Appreciate it. Alex Dean there.
Thanks.
Let's just turn to Kelvin Mackenzie for some thoughts from him. Too long, the whole process, too darn long.
I agree with Alex. I mean, literally, if they ended it tonight after the GBNews interview with Ms Truss, it would be fine. The idea that we've got another couple of weeks of this to go, well, in fact, I tell you what, it's longer than that. It's 3 weeks to go to September 5, by which time we will then know what the price cap for energy is on August the 26th. So there'll be a matter of, 11 days before a Prime Minister can come forward and say, this is what I'm going to do for you, the very, very skint. I don't want anything done for the middle classes. Let them get on with it. All right, they don't go to Crete next year. They go to, I don't know, they go to Sige's or somewhere like that. They just got to get on with it, right? And there's too much of handing out our money. So I do like the one Truss idea. I worry about whether Truss is any good, actually, funnily enough. And by the way, 2 years' time, there's a general election. Right in the middle of all this, we could have that we will end up perhaps with the 5th Tory leader in 8 years. I mean, this all gets lost in the wash. You think it's dangerous being the manager of Charlton Athletic? You try being leader of the Tory party. It's a nightmare out there.
Whether it's Truss or whether it's Sunak, they won't get a honeymoon, because
there is no honeymoon.
They're straight into it, and that actually becomes an argument for truncating this process. Because actually, right now, instead of having to prep for tonight's interview with Alastair Stewart, Liz Truss could be sitting down with policy advisors, working out what she's going to do about, cost of living.
I absolutely agree. The other thing she should be doing is thinking about her book, because honestly, I very much fear a Conservative leader going into the general election. So she should be. So Boris will be getting his book out at 28 million miles an hour, because otherwise he'll be competing against Liz Truss's book.
The next former Prime Minister.
Yeah.
Kelvin, thanks very much indeed. Many an email coming in. Let's share some of them. David says, cynical of me, but this entire leadership contest looks like a terrific fictional thriller to me. We just need a Sunak victory to add a further twist, asking, was this fixed? As the polls say, it's for Liz Truss to lose. Elizabeth says, as an 80-year-old pensioner, I don't support Sunak at the moment because he's already cost millions for people like me by taking away the triple lock. I think we've got the triple lock back, haven't we?
Do you know what? That's written by a socialist.
Okay.
The socialists watch shows like this and put these ridiculous suggestions in. At 80, the last thing she needs to worry about is the triple lock.
I have no idea whether Elizabeth is a socialist or indeed 80. There you go. John says, Martin Lewis had warned the government of an energy crisis back in January, have completely ignored him. Why? The government's got no one capable of sorting out the energy
That's
crisis.
another socialist.
Do keep them coming in. Well, Leigh, in Greater Manchester, where tonight's forum will be held from 5 o'clock, coming up soon, is one of the so-called Red Wall seats, with the Labour Party in power there since 1922, until the seat flipped to the Conservatives in 2019 as part of that rush to the Red Wall, lured in by promises which you could argue were acted upon to get Brexit done, maybe less so, reduce regional inequality, levelling up. Excuse me, either Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak will have to successfully defend this seat if they're to have any sort of victory come the next general election with a decent majority. So how will the candidates keep supporting in traditional red wall areas? The political commentator Stephen Carlton-Woods joins me from Manchester. Stephen, appreciate your time. I thought I was almost going to be overwhelmed by that frog leaping from my throat there, but I'm back to normal. Tonight, if Leigh offers a perspective on British politics for Liz Truss to ponder on, what is it?
Well, I think the big question tonight for Liz Truss will probably be about levelling up, because we need more money in the northwest when it comes to infrastructure. We've got problems with employment, housing, all these different things. So that's definitely got to be on the agenda tonight. But the funny thing is, what's been driving the conversation for the last month is the narrative from the mainstream media. They seem to have been setting the agenda and the language, what's being used. So levelling up is heavily used by the media at the moment, and it means different things to different people. But mainly it's about the infrastructure, so that businesses can connect with the rest of the country and bring businesses into the northwest.
Not that, Stephen. Liz Truss has said, hasn't she? Hasn't she said that we're going to have the Northern Powerhouse, the links across the Transpennine routes? The money will be there.
Yeah, but I don't think there's a lot of trust with the Northern Powerhouse. I mean, this was an old brainchild of Michael Heseltine going back many years, and then the Cameron Osborne era, they actually implemented the Northern Powerhouse. But I think there was a lot more that needed to be done with that, and the members are feeling a bit despondent about what's happened up to now. We've been talking about this for the last 12 years, really, about Northern Powerhouse, and we're not really moving on with it. So I know there's a lot happened over the last couple of years under the Boris regime, but it's a difficult one, and I think members in particular and supporters are a little bit despondent about that.
Stephen, I fear I'm about to be struck by lightning, but Michael Heseltine, when you think back, what he did for Merseyside. If you go to the docks area there, there will be those people who will say that was his idea right from the get-go, and it's made a big difference.
No, I hear what you're saying, and I agree with that, but you won't get many people in Liverpool thanking him for it. The Conservative is a dirty word in Liverpool, and very much a lot of distrust with the Tories in Liverpool. And how we, how the Conservatives as a party overcome that, I don't know, but it's a tough one. So, I mean, there's many areas that are very strongly Labour across the northwest. I mean, you've got central Manchester, for instance. They've not had a Conservative council there for 30 years. It's an impossible area for the Conservatives. How do they make inroads into areas like that? And I don't think the situation now with the party, I think the party's damaged considerably. So moving forward makes it even harder.
Stephen, do the culture wars, how much do the culture wars mean for red wall seats? I ask that because right at the beginning of this process, I remember interviewing Rod Liddle, who said, this is about the culture wars. It's about the fact in seats like Leigh, you've got a lot of people who would consider themselves traditional Labour voters. They like a lot of the economic stuff from Labour. What they hate is the Harriet Harman stuff, the identity politics, the diversity agenda, etc., etc. They like Labour as it was 30 years ago, not as it is today.
Well, I think the working class areas, if you're talking about that, have been quite open-minded to the whole thing, and they've gone on the journey with Boris because it was about, at that time, about getting Brexit done. Obviously, this levelling up bit and bringing money into the area was a big thing about that as well. But you've got areas in Manchester where there's very affluent areas, who we would call the champagne socialists, who will never, ever subscribe to the ideas of Conservatives and continue to vote Labour. So that makes it even more difficult. And in the meantime, the working classes in these areas are being forgotten about or being used as political footballs.
Stephen Carlton-Woods, really appreciate your thoughts this afternoon. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
You're with Colin Brazier. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. We are previewing tonight's exclusive on GB News with the Tory leadership hopeful and quite possibly next Prime Minister Liz Truss. From 5 o'clock, my colleague Alastair Stewart will be joined by the current Foreign Secretary as you, our GB News viewers and listeners, put your questions directly to her. Ahead of the forum, we're looking at some of the key policy battlegrounds between Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak. And coming up, last night, the two candidates went head-to-head in a Hustings event in Darlington. We'll cross over to our blue corner in the studio for reaction. We're joined by three Conservatives, each with their own ideas on who is the right person to take the party forward. Back in a moment.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hi there, we are looking ahead to our People's Forum this afternoon. It's exclusively on GB News from 5 o'clock. The Tory leadership hopeful, quite possibly next Prime Minister, Liz Truss, is going to be speaking to my colleague, the presenter Alastair Stewart, who's going to be taking your questions directly to her. Last night, Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak took questions from the public. It was another Hustings event. This one was in Darlington in County Durham. Liz Truss slammed direct payments to help with energy bills as what she described as Gordon Brown economics. Rishi Sunak, for his part, faced questions from the public about wielding the dagger that brought down Boris Johnson. Here are some of the highlights.
First thing we should do as Conservatives is help people have more of their own money. What I don't support is taking money off people in tax and then giving it back to them in handouts. That, to me, is Gordon Brown economics. And, you know, frankly, we had years of that under Labour, and what we got was a slow growth economy.
Gordon Brown economics. You're accusing Rishi Sunak of having Gordon Brown economics.
What I'm saying is that...
Yes or no?
Well... I was actually responding to your question, Tom, which is what I'm here for. Which is what I'm here for this evening.
Rishi Sunak's policies,
which is, you know, do you just think about there's a fixed pie, we have to share out the pie, and we have to give out money in handouts. My view is we can grow the pie. That there is having lower taxes actually helps us generate more income into the economy, so there is more money to go round.
No, I'm out and about all day, every day. I'm giving it absolutely everything I've got, and I'm fighting for the things that I passionately believe in that are right for this country, and I'm just going to keep doing that with everything I've got until the last day of this campaign, and I hope I get to see lots of you over the next few weeks. That's all right. No, that's all right. That's right. You're fully entitled to ask questions, sir, and Tom asked a question, right? So, yeah, you're asking why I resigned. Yes, it was really sad. I was sad I had to resign, actually. I was sad I resigned. But actually, you are totally, and respectfully, you are simply wrong to say that I wielded the dagger, because you know what? It wasn't just me who felt that enough was enough. The government was on the wrong side of yet another ethical decision. And it was 60 other members of Parliament also thought that enough was enough because we wanted to change things, and that's why we're here. And yes, the simple answer to that question is yes, I am the person who can beat Keir Starmer. That's why I'm standing here tonight.
That's what Hustings should be. Some real animation and emotion there on topics that matter. Here we've got a panel of Conservatives. It's our blue corner. Let's find out what they made of last night's Hustings in Darlington. We've got the Conservative Keith Prince, who is a member of the Greater London Authority, the Conservative commentator Anna McGovern, and the Conservative councillor Andrew Eyre from Sevenoaks District Council. Andrew, I'll start with you if I may. That was quite gripping telly there, wasn't it?
It is. Your point is exactly made. That is what Hustings should be.
Yeah.
And 2-3 generations ago, that is what Hustings were, out in the open.
Unvarnished, unpolished, and not just presentational, presidential-style coronation stuff.
And we were talking about presentation before. Rishi Sunak there was struggling a little bit. There's no question.
You think?
He struggled to get the right answer.
Wasn't there? He was angry.
That may be the answer. The fact he was emotional, he was angry, he wanted to get the message over. I just want to pull us back slightly to what Alex and Kelvin were talking about, the process. The process is just far too long. It was too long when it was Theresa May. It was too long when it was too long now. The Conservative Party has to find a better route to do this.
But Anna, not this time. You stuck with it this time.
But absolutely not this time. No. We have to do.
Can you see any? I mean, I tried to defend the process to Alex Dean a few moments ago, saying actually it is an opportunity for people maybe who've not been exposed to Conservative policies and ideology before to be exposed to them. But would you cut it? Is it too long?
I think it could possibly be too long because, of course, with the country, all the problems that we're facing right now, you know, we have increasing energy bills. We're coming out of COVID-19 and the damage of all the policies and the restrictions that were caused on everyday lives. I think, especially with Boris Johnson, you know, when he resigned, I think there's a lot of anarchy potentially at the moment because we don't actually, presently have a Prime Minister who's really doing that much because there's so much focus on the leadership race. Now, of course, all of this is very important because we want to make sure that we hopefully choose the right candidate to lead this country. So there has to be a process that follows that to make sure that we have the right person. However, I think there could be the potential to maybe cut down some of that time because we do need someone in power to make those decisions and move the country forward.
Keith Prince, it is important, though, isn't it, if you are a Conservative believer, to hear somebody like Liz Truss there talk about something as a very basic metaphor, but it's a very strong metaphor still, the pie. You know, money's not there. The government doesn't have money.
No.
It's got taxpayers' money, and you've got to grow wealth, like you know, and then you can slice the pie accordingly.
Well, we're not like Labour. We don't have a magic money tree, unfortunately. You know, we have the reality is the pie is as big as it is. But she's right. Her policies will expand the pie, and that was the big difference I thought last night was about economic policy and the approach to the economy. The only thing I would say about the whole process is lack of choice. I would rather see more candidates in the final round so that the members, like myself, like my two colleagues, actually have a real choice of who to choose from.
Do any of you, just on that point about, you know, he who wields the dagger never gets to wear the crown, that old cliché in politics, is Sunak weakened by having been part of that plot to bring down Boris?
No, 200%. Every member I speak to mentions that.
OK. Anna?
No, I don't think so at all, because actually, during the Sky News debate, for example, Liz Truss, she started off very strong answering those questions from the audience, but when it came to Kay Burley, and particularly the questions of integrity and Boris Johnson, it completely fell apart. And I think people would, struggle to actually trust what she's saying in terms of having faith in the current Prime Minister. So, no, I don't think so at all.
Andrew, does it matter?
No, it doesn't matter, I don't think. And I think, as Rishi Sunak himself said, 60-odd people went, and Rishi Sunak wasn't the first anyway. So I think the process is people are listening to this. And I would just comment that the government is still operating. The government is doing things. I think the government is failing. And I saw one of your bulletins out there, Nadhim Zahawi was being interviewed. He should come out more to the fore and talk about what the government is doing, albeit not on major decisions.
Keep your thoughts coming in on the big topics of the day. We'll try and feed them into our conversation. It's only 25 minutes away. Leigh in Greater Manchester. Alastair Stewart's going to be talking to Liz Truss in front of a studio audience. Your questions from viewers and listeners will be put to Liz Truss, potential future Conservative leader and quite possibly, if not probably, our next Prime Minister. In the meantime, here's Ray with today's headlines.
It's 4:35. I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. The Foreign Secretary says more taxes, including levies on energy companies, will not solve the cost of living crisis. Liz Truss has also denied ruling out giving cash payments to help low-income earners. That's as figures show households already owe suppliers £1.3 billion. The Treasury says a new support package is being worked on for the next Prime Minister to consider as soon as they take office. Almost 1 million children in London will be offered a polio vaccine. That's after the virus was detected in sewage in boroughs across the north of the capital. There have been no confirmed cases so far, but health officials are concerned by the rising number of samples being found. Children between the ages of 1 and 9 will be given the jab. Manchester City's Benjamin Mendy has pleaded not guilty to an 8th count of rape. The footballer has already denied 7 counts, as well as 1 of attempted rape and 1 of sexual assault. The offences were allegedly committed against 7 women between October 2018 and August 2021. His trial is due to start on Monday. Former President Trump has refused to answer questions in his deposition with New York Attorney General. It's over a civil investigation into his family's business practices. The Attorney General is looking into whether the Trump Organization inflated real estate values. In a statement, Donald Trump said he declined to answer the questions, citing his constitutional Fifth Amendment right. He's also denied any wrongdoing. On TV, online and on DAB Plus Radio, this is GB News. Now let's get back to Colin Brazier in just a moment.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
OK, here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.228 and 1.184 euros. The price of gold currently standing at £1,468 and 47 pence per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the finance report on GB News, Investments That Matter.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
"20 minutes or thereabouts away from our People's Forum. Back to our build-up then to the People's Forum. It's in Leigh, in Greater Manchester this afternoon. And one of the topics we are, I think it's fair to say, likely to hear mentioned is what the candidates would do about the small boat crisis in the English Channel. Both leadership candidates have pledged to tackle illegal migration and have voiced their support for the Rwanda policy. Mark White has more.
The decision to abandon plans to house 1,200 asylum seekers at this former RAF base in Yorkshire illustrates perfectly the headache the next Prime Minister will face in how best to tackle a deep and growing crisis in the asylum system. Just months after Boris Johnson announced a three-pronged plan, including sending thousands of asylum seekers to Rwanda, those plans are in disarray. Yet both Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss say they are still committed to the Rwanda policy, which they believe could prove a key deterrent to the thousands crossing the English Channel on small boats each week. For now, though, it remains mired in legal challenges and going nowhere anytime soon. Providing the legal dimensions can be solved, both candidates say they want to pursue more Rwanda-style agreements with other countries. Neither candidate has said they'll pull out of the European Convention on Human Rights, whose rules form the basis for many of the legal challenges. They've only said they would consider a withdrawal. Rishi Sunak says he wants the Home Office to use the UN's more narrow definition of a refugee in determining who qualifies for asylum. He'd also cancel aid payments to countries who refuse to allow the return of failed asylum seekers. Mark White, GB News.
Well, Mark White there with some of the background to the migration crisis. We're joined by Stephen Wolfe, who's the Director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity, who's been kind enough to come into the studio today. Stephen, it's nice to see you. What can either of these candidates do that's not already been done by government?
The most important thing, if they really are going to achieve anything in trying to attack the immigration industry and consequently the asylum applicants, is by removing the ECHR from our statute book and pulling out of it. Because only if they do that will that give them the flexibility just to concentrate on those people who claim asylum genuinely under the Refugee Convention, the UN Refugee Convention. And that's really, really important because our research is indicating that the vast majority of the 871,000 asylum applicants since 2001 have been let in through discretionary rules, not that of the UN Convention.
So the whole system of asylum processing is actually the root cause of the problem, or a root cause?
Yes, and to be fair on Rishi, he identified that in his 10 points on how he was going to deal with immigration as one of those key areas. But what I've always had concern about is the lawyers involved in this. The lawyers are all of a mindset that they can't upset two groups. One is those in the UN Convention supporting, and that's generally the Foreign Office, and those who don't want to have any conflict with, say, France or other European countries, when we can turn boats back under the law of the sea, SOLAS. So we've had powers to do this. So the second issue I would say that they should do is start using SOLAS, turn the boats back to France, and challenge France to take them on in either their own courts, the European courts, or our own courts, to say that that law doesn't apply.
Kelvin Mackenzie, I know you're more of a Sunak supporter, maybe a reluctant Sunak supporter, but on this one, on stopping the Channel migrant traffic, in my bones, it feels like Truss might be the person to take the really decisive action necessary.
Well, look, if I thought that there was anybody in politics who, in any party at all, that would adopt the idea of turning the boats back and pushing them back, right, they would have not only my support, they would win a general election by, forget about 80-seat majority, it would be a 180-seat majority. It's the thing nobody wants to talk about because immediately you talk about it and you're white and you've got this kind of hair. Oh, racist, racist. Right, you hear that straight away. So I am in favour of turning them back. My issue is there anybody, these two, 630, are there any of them that would have the energy to take the hatred that we poured at them?
Stephen, I don't know if you're still a lawyer, but you certainly were a lawyer at one time, weren't you? The point about that Kelvin makes, if you are Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak and you're thinking, OK, Kelvin Mackenzie's bang on, we're going to do the pushback thing, we're going to get the jet skis in the English Channel, we're going to push back the dinghies. And you're thinking, aren't you, at the back of your head, you're thinking, because your lawyers are telling you, Ms Truss, Mr Sunak, don't do it. Don't do it because the first time somebody drowns in the English Channel, eventually it's the ECHR or the UN or whoever it is, they're going to come after, not just the government, they're going to come after you personally for that policy.
Yes, and I suspect that's what some of the lawyers would say. And what I would look at, some of the Conservative MPs, Kemi Badenoch, for example, Suella Braverman, who've already shown themselves to be quite strong on the issues of immigration, race, Black Lives Matter, in challenging and taking on the left and their arguments. I think they should have key roles in this. And I wouldn't also say Priti Patel has pushed really hard, and I think she's been up against the wall of the internal lawyers, against those within her own party who share those views of concern and not really being too worried about immigration. I think she has shown really great strength in pushing the Rwanda policy through. So there are people in that party who can achieve it, but will they?
Kelvin Mackenzie, there's a fiction at the moment, isn't there, which is that being presented to Conservative Party members, which is that I'm Liz Truss, I'm Rishi Sunak, I can pull a lever and things happen. As Stephen points out, someone like Priti Patel, who had the right ideas, but then when she tried to deliver, was accused of bullying officials. How do you get stuff done?
It's very, very hard. There's some very, very clever, actually, members of Ms Truss's previous party, the Lib Dems and Socialists, who are spending their entire time polishing the stairs for her. She will find it very, very tough. If she does any of this, by the way, if she actually deals with this issue, she will be a queen for 1,000 years. This issue is not going away. There are terrible issues coming down the track. One of them is, who is going to house these literally tens of thousands of people coming to our shores? Because I tell you what, the landlords, thanks to Osborne's tax rulings, have all bailing out. What's happening right now? In working class areas, rents are through the roof. There are not enough flats for the ordinary people, the indigenous people to live in, let alone the tens of thousands that are coming in.
Just very briefly, Stephen Wolfe, we talked about this yesterday, didn't we? Lintel News, former RAF base, no longer going to be used to house asylum seekers, stroke migrants. They've got to go somewhere. And whether you're Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak, you've still got people who need a bed for the night.
That's true, and that's why they have to get hold of the Rwanda policy and make it work. That's why they have to seek alternative places that people can stay. They may have to use armed forces bases to host these people, but in a policy of removing them. In that articles we were looking about, 40% of the recent migrants coming across in the Channel were Albanians. We need deals to make sure the planes are full, the boats are full, returning them back to Albania so that we can deal with the genuine asylum seekers. Otherwise, the housing crisis, as Kelvin has just mentioned, will get worse and worse and worse. Bearing in mind, we're paying £6 million a day to house them in hotels at the moment.
We should bear that in mind. Let's keep bearing it in mind. Stephen Wolfe, thanks very much indeed. Thank you. Emails. Les says, when the pressure was on Boris, Rishi deserted his post. Take away all the promises and gloss. You can never trust or support a deserter. Graham says, I watched the hustings last night. Rishi Sunak was bouncing around like Tigger. It was like watching someone who'd swallowed an election manual. I don't believe a word he says. And Barbara says, I truly think that Rishi is the kind and thoughtful face of conservatism, and Liz is the hard-nosed and ruthless ones. Do keep those thoughts coming in, please. Oh, here's one from Laura. If Liz Truss does become the next Conservative leader, she won't last a year. She's too weak. Elizabeth, I think part of the problem is, well, no. Whatever that email was, it's disappeared into the ether along with my auto cue. So let's reflect on this. Another policy likely to face Liz Truss tonight in Leigh, the demand for housing. We've touched on it already just there with Stephen Wolfe. Rishi Sunak has so far vowed to build, or block, I should say, building on the green belt, and will impose financial penalties on developers who don't build the number of houses they promised. Liz Truss, on the other hand, has pledged to rip up current housing targets and allow rent payments to count towards credit checks so more young people can get onto the housing ladder. Joining us now here in the studio, the property expert, Julie Ford. Julie, welcome to you and thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
We just go around, no pun intended, we go around the houses on this one, don't we, every time? We know if you're a Conservative, and this is Conservative Party navel-gazing right now, that if there is an article of faith that if you want people to become Conservatives, move away slowly as they get older from the left to the right, they have to get on the property ladder. Mm-hmm. It's really hard.
It is really hard, and I think, unfortunately, we're working with an old mindset as well of exactly that, an Englishman's home is his castle. We don't think like that anymore. Society has changed. A lot of people are more transient with their jobs, with their lifestyles. So actually owning isn't necessarily good for everybody now as it was back then. And I think that needs to be taken on board by the government as well, because yes, I absolutely agree. If people want to own, they should have the ability to do that as easily as possible. But it may not fit for everybody these days.
Yeah. Kelvin Mackenzie?
Well, I don't really agree with that, actually, to be honest with you. I think it's for everybody must have the opportunity that they can shut that door behind them and think, well, at least this is me and I haven't got a landlord who's just put up my rent by 18, 20, 24%. We are in an absolute rental crisis. And the Conservatives have got to get a grip with it. And the reason I say they've got to get a grip with it is because if they don't, Labour might decide to bring in rent controls. And then that, by the way, will be the end for everybody. So the young people, I have no idea. They'll never get on any kind of ladder because they won't even be able to get into a home because anybody who's got into a rented flat will stay there for 40 and 50 years.
Julie, earlier this week we had Tim Montgomery, who's a Conservative thinker of some renown, and he's thought about the housing for a long time, and he says it's not a simple solution, but you have to think about new towns. You've got to do away with this sort of this sacred idea of the green belt. Yeah. You've got to persuade farmers to give up farmland, and you've got to put the infrastructure in. It's going to require the sort of command economy measures that you probably last saw during the war, or maybe during the pandemic.
But Julie was there, weren't you, in the war?
I was, absolutely. I look good on it, though, don't
Kelvin.
You do look good on it.
I mean, you see what I mean, Julie, that it's going to require such will to make a difference, isn't it? And an awful lot of money.
It is, absolutely, but there are options to look at other solutions as well. The government is talking about building. You know, Rishi in his last budget in the autumn was talking about building 300,000 new homes. Now that's come down to 180,000. Liz is talking about removing the target altogether. But they seem to be ignoring the fact that we do have a lot of long-term empty properties in the UK as well. Currently, there are 238,000 long-term empty homes, and long-term empty means empty for more than 6 months. We currently have 270,000 people homeless or looking for accommodation. So if you brought those empty properties back into use, you would solve a big chunk of the problem, not the problem completely, absolutely, but you would solve a big chunk of the problem. I think looking closer to home at refurbishing those properties and getting them back into use will be a cheaper option, as well as actually getting the property in there and ready quicker, as well as building from the foundations up.
We were just having a conversation with Stephen Wolfe a moment ago. He's interested in migration and stopping illegal migration in particular. I mean, in this conversation around housing, so rarely is the obvious fact stated that over the last 2 decades we've had an extra, 10 million people come to live in the UK? I mean, that seems to be the starting point of the conversation. It so rarely is.
Yeah, absolutely. But as a society, we're growing anyway. Obviously, people are having families, people are living longer as well.
The birth rate's at its lowest since records began.
The birth rate is down. And the issue is the migration is massively up. That gap is being filled by people from other countries in the world.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, we need the housing stock there to support everybody in this country. Immigration as much as anybody else, but I do think building may not be the best option to focus on now if there's other solutions that could be done quicker and maybe cheaper.
Well, and the thing is, building just takes years and years and years, so there's no quick solutions. Julie Ford, thanks very much indeed for coming in. Appreciate it. Well, in less than 10 minutes' time, some of our viewers will be putting their questions to the Conservative leadership hopeful Liz Truss. Alastair Stewart will be live with the Foreign Secretary in Leigh in Greater Manchester. Here's a flavour of what's to come.
As the race for number 10 intensifies, we are giving you the chance to get to know our next Prime Minister. We've invited the 2 candidates to meet you, the GB News viewers, and let you put your questions to them. Head directly to gbnews.uk or send me your questions to questions@gbnews.uk.
Join Alastair Stewart for the People's Forum with Liz Truss. Today at 5, only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Little over 5 minutes away. Well, I'm back in our blue corner, panting. I've had to run over with our panel of Conservatives. They've been listening to our conversations about the candidates' stands on migration. We just had one on housing. Here alongside me still, Keith Prince, member of the Greater London Authority. He is supporting Liz Truss. He'll reassert why he's doing that in just a second. The Conservative commentator, Anna McGovern, is here too, still remaining broadly undecided. We'll see whether she's got any further towards clarity. And the Conservative councillor, Andrew Eyre, who's with Sevenoaks District Council, who is supporting Rishi Sunak. Keith, start with you. Just on the housing question, it's boring but terribly important, and whatever decisions Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak make this year won't be felt for years, and therein lies the dilemma.
No, that's true, and I do a lot of work myself with the homeless charities, and it is a real problem, but the fundamental thing that we believe as Conservatives is that people should have the right to own their own homes, and Liz is making a big thing about that. And I think that is a very important issue. Clearly, homelessness is an important issue, but I think that we need to look at that from a slightly different perspective. We need to look at long-term solutions for that rather than just the quick fix of putting him in houses. And that has not... During COVID, everybody got somewhere to stay, but what didn't happen was that not everybody got the education they needed, got the help they needed to make it all the way through. So there's still work to be done, and I will be speaking to Liz about that when she gets the job.
OK. Anna, I forget how many Conservative Prime Ministers and others too have said they want to make Britain a country at ease with itself. One way to do that is to solve what we call intergenerational friction, I suppose, between we oldies and younger voters, and that sense that your cohort, your generation, just can't can't get a stake in society that we got.
Yeah, that's definitely what it feels like. And I think for even myself and many people I know, especially young people, you know, we're completing our university degrees, we're starting, you know, getting our foot on the ladder career-wise, starting new jobs and such. And I think the big thing is, you know, it's like a conservative sort of approach, almost like, you know, to own your own home. And this is what people strive for. And I think for many young people, including myself, that feels like an unrealistic prospect, especially with bills going up. And this is something that I think that has been lost a lot in the dialogue. You know, the candidates are not really saying, I don't believe, how they're going to help young people, even like myself, you know, get on that housing ladder and being able to own their own home.
Andrew, it's become an article of faith. It's almost a commandment of conservative philosophy, isn't it, that you must get your own home?
It is, and potentially we have to move away from that, go to the more European model. My son thinks the housing market is broken. He's moved to Sweden. So he knows, as Anna knows, that he can't get on the housing market in Britain. The big issue for me is planning. And the Conservative Party has made a mess of revising the planning. There is lots of housing out there. There is lots of land to building housing out there, but the planning rules stop it happening.
Well, it's a topic that may come up this evening in Leigh. We'll see. Andrew, Anna, Keith, thanks all very much indeed for your contributions today. Alastair Stewart is next in Leigh in Greater Manchester with your questions. Stand by.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me!
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome to Leigh, a Labour seat for nearly 100 years before Boris Johnson turned it blue. Whoever wins the keys to number 10 will need to keep it Conservative. Can Liz Truss do that? Well, tonight she'll be facing our viewers here in Leigh. You are watching GB News and this is the People's Forum with Liz Truss, live from Leigh. Our GB News viewers here in Leigh. So first up, it's Brian Sheeran. Brian, come to the microphone and put your question to Liz Truss.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to Leigh.
Great to be here.
OK, we lent you our vote in 2019, in my view, for three reasons. One, a lot of people were really upset that a liberal left element was trying to undermine the Brexit result. Secondly, a big blonde, bubbly guy called Marmite Boris managed to get very, very popular. Perhaps it's somewhat waned now, but at the time he was popular and he had a clear vision for the country. And third, your biggest asset was your opposition was Jeremy Corbyn, who wasn't particularly popular. But you don't have any of those three advantages in the next election. This town is on its backside. The cost of living is going through the roof. We've been promised levelling up. We don't see a lot of it. We understand that there's been a pandemic, but unless you can convince us that you're going to give us what you promised, next time I'm voting for Joe Platt again. So what are you going to do to give Leigh